All right, ooh, how about that? We are amplified. All right, thank you all for your patience and for being here. As I think was explained to you, we all came here directly from another event in town. It's Art on the Avenue. I would encourage all of you, once you leave this event, to please try to visit Art on the Avenue today. My colleague is walking in. It was probably also shared with you, the mayor and my colleague, our colleague Councilman Aguirre, are not able to be here today, but the 5 of us are here. And we will stay for 2 hours, given the late start. Do appreciate everybody's cooperation in that. We got across town as quickly as we could. Thank you so much. General sort of ground rules and past practices. We have received questions in advance through an online portal. They've been put into categories, and then we also are receiving questions in real time on note cards. If you would like to submit one, there are staff members. There's Alethea, she can raise her hand. Jan Lambert is there, and there are other members of the city staff, all have this badge on, and then there are city members outside the door here that can take those cards. I'm going to pause, actually, and introduce myself. In a zeal to get started, I sort of dove right in. My name is Sarah Bagley. I'm currently the vice mayor with the city of Alexandria. I'd like to give my colleagues each a moment to introduce themselves, starting with my colleague, Abdel Al-Nubi.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for being here. Abdel Al-Nubi, councilman.
I'm Councilman Kirk McPike. Thank you all very much for being here today.
Thanks. Thank you. Again, I'm Sarah Bagley.
Councilman John Taylor Chapman.
Councilwoman Jacinta Green, and thank you all for coming today, and again, sorry for starting late. Thank you.
And last, my colleague reminded me there are Spanish interpreters here. If you need interpretation, there are 2 hands up off to the side here. If you need other interpretation that we don't have today, that feedback is still really useful to future events. So please feel free to come over and talk to us about interpretation and language needs, including sign and other interpretive needs. Last, I would just ask, generally speaking, in the past, this is collectively maybe our 6th or 7th of these. We generally have gotten through all the questions that are submitted, but we do at times sort of answer several at once if they're on the same theme. So just want to apprise everybody, we may do that at times. This is my first time moderating one of these, so I also would ask that everybody, be mindful of that. The mayor generally handles this seat, and so just bear with me and my colleagues as we try to do right by her experience with this process. So with that, what I'm noticing is the questions we received in advance and the questions we've received so far today are very much in sort of 4 categories. Those categories are planning, which is a big one, obviously, traffic and pedestrian safety, parks and the waterfront, and ICE and immigration issues. So just to be mindful, we will be talking about all those topics, but I might try to do those in batches. So what I'm gonna do first is actually skim through and see if there's anything that doesn't neatly fall into those, and try to knock those out first. And to be honest, I think they all pretty much fall into those. So let's start then. I think there's a sort of a mix of questions here that fall into both federal impacts and ICE, because in truth, those are related. I think we wouldn't necessarily be having an immigration and ICE conversation but for federal action. So I'm gonna go ahead and start in that topic area. If you don't hear your question immediately, be mindful there are 10 or 12 we got in advance and then another stack here. So we'll work through the topics. I'm gonna read a few of them that I think touch on the topic, and then I'm going to invite my colleagues to address, and depending on where those answers go, I might return back to the list and go deeper, if my colleagues are comfortable with that approach. Okay. All right, so I'm going to read a few questions. Okay. All right, so one of the questions What do council members have to say to workers and community members fearing persecution and random targeting by ICE raids as they are simply going about their day, as we saw in Alexandria in recent weeks? And I'm gonna do that one as a standalone at first. There's many follow-ups, but I think that's a good place for us to start because it touches on the city council role and other roles. And my Councilman Chapman, if you wouldn't mind sort of starting off on this topic.
Sure. So for council members, and of course I'm speaking for myself, I think one of the things is I think council has the duty to continue to push kind of our federal folks, whether it be our congressmen and our senators, to get real action or continue to challenge the White House about how they are dealing with our localities. I don't think we, frankly, have any support in our governor's mansion, and so that's kind of a wasted space right now. I think after November, hopefully we can make some change there and have somebody that is actually going to look out for Virginia localities. Generally speaking, if we had somebody in the governor's mansion, I think we could have a lot more impact locally by having somebody that supports localities. Going to our federal folks is, I think, the only option, but as we've seen, there hasn't been much change at that level. And so what do we say? There's not a whole lot to say that's actually going to make people feel safe. That's the reality of federal overreach. And the power that they have as immigration and customs enforcement.
Thank you, Councilmember Chapman. And I'll add before, if I could, I'm going to go to Councilman McPike next on the same topic with another question, just to give you a heads up. But I just want to add one point as well, just for those who might be following this topic for the first time or following a town hall for the first time. Something that the council has been reiterating since day one is our police department and our sheriff's department is not participating in any ICE activity in the community. So when there are, if you see evidence of raids, if you see evidence in other communities, our police department is not a part of that effort. If our police department is in your community, it's about local criminal activity. So I just wanted to clarify that for people if there's confusing messaging on that point. On a related question, I'm trying to capture as many questions as I can. Does Alexandria, okay, so if Mr. McPike, if you could answer this next question. Does Alexandria City Council believe that undocumented Alexandrians have a right to due process? What are they willing to do to pressure the sheriff to stop denying them this basic right?
Every single person in the United States of America, no matter how you came here, why you're here, what you're accused of, who you are, has a right to due process under federal law, under Virginia law, and frankly, under the Constitution of the United States of America. As the Vice Mayor said, our city is committed to that. We do not cooperate, our police do not cooperate with ICE, which is engaged in what I think can only be described as fascistic raids in many parts of the country. You've seen them here in Alexandria, you've seen even more egregious examples in places like Chicago this past couple of days. Obviously, there are members of the community who are concerned with Sheriff Casey's, the Sheriff's Department, and how they interact with ICE and what they feel they are legally obligated to do versus not do in terms of responding to warrants that they are presented by ICE. The sheriff does not work for the city council. He is not like our police chief, who we can tell our police chief, we don't want you engaging with ICE in any way, shape, or form. The sheriff, due to the sort of split state/local nature of his job, the fact that the core of his funding comes from the state government, and the fact that he's an independent elected official, we do not have the ability to dictate to him the policies that he puts in place in his facility and how he chooses to interpret laws that govern his interaction with federal law enforcement agencies. Now, I know that many members of council have spoken to the sheriff about this. I encourage everyone in Alexandria who has concerns about this to speak to Sheriff Casey. Sheriff Casey is a good person. He is a member of our community. He lives not far from here. He cares a great deal about the people of Alexandria, and he is happy to meet with and discuss concerns that people in our city have. And I encourage people to do that. He is an elected official, as we are. If you, who he represents, if you have concerns about how he is conducting his role, there are elections, there are opportunities to meet with him. He is out in the community right now. Please do so. And we as city council members, if we feel that the sheriff is stepping to a level that we don't necessarily agree with, we are certainly communicating that to him as well. Now, when it comes to the sheriff's department, the only thing that we control is the funding that we provide to the sheriff's department, which is supplemental funding on top of what he receives from the state. But that money doesn't go to the sheriff. That money is mostly used to support the people who are in the jail in Alexandria, both the deputies who work there, making sure that there are enough of them, that they're doing their job in safe and sort of manageable ways, but more importantly, the people who are there. Now, a lot of people don't know that most people who are in jail are technically innocent under the law. These are people who are waiting for their trial date. They have not been found guilty. They're not being punished. So we have an absolutely sacrosanct responsibility to ensure that the jail that we are housing them in here in Alexandria meets their needs in terms of physical safety, in terms of nutrition, gives them opportunities to reenter our society, better prepared to be good and active members of it. And so when we talk about the council sort of trying to put pressure on the sheriff, there's nothing that we could do to the sheriff's department that wouldn't directly impact these inmates who have taken custody of them, have a significant moral responsibility to ensure that the jail that we are housing them in is beyond humane. It is fit for the purpose that it is being used for, and that they are being taken care of appropriately. So I, again, encourage people to talk to the sheriff about his policies, because he ultimately is the authority that has the right to set those, but to recognize that the only things that the council could do are things that would actually hurt some of the people that we are most concerned about in this equation.
No, I appreciate that, and I just want to note, there's a question that was submitted asking about council reviewing funding for Sheriff Casey, and for the moment, my colleague has somewhat addressed the dynamic in funding between city council and the sheriff, so I'm going to sort of mark that one as addressed for the time being, to the extent that other colleagues want to comment on it. There's a question I'm going to try to answer quickly that was submitted before Professor Councilman Al-Nubi, I'm going to come to you next with a similar themed question. But we got a question, two questions I'm going to try to answer quickly for everybody who maybe didn't come on this topic today. One is saying, Oliver asked, we've heard of the sheriff turning people to ICE. Why is he doing that? And the other is, what is the difference between an administrative warrant and a judicial warrant? And so I just want to address, to the extent we've heard of the sheriff turning people to ICE, this is something that council is aware of. It is happening, and I want to be clear, to the extent that a person is in the custody of the sheriff's department, has been arrested, charged, is being held, and a magistrate judge has determined that the sheriff has been given custody, that is a person who may be implicated in an administrative warrant that hands them to ICE. I just want to be clear for, again, members of the community who are not deeply following this yet, potentially, or who are just learning about this issue. What is not happening is the sheriff's department or deputies in the community picking people up, or at the courthouse picking people up at hearings. The only people that are being implicated by this very real issue are people who have been picked up by a law enforcement agency, brought to the jail, been seen by a magistrate judge, and placed in the custody of the sheriff. And that leads to the second question between the difference between an administrative warrant and a judicial warrant. The difference is what it sounds like. A judicial warrant is issued by a court, by a judge. An administrative warrant is issued by someone who is not a court, not a judge, but has been otherwise empowered to sign that document, to make that request. That is the current crux of this issue, before all of us and before the sheriff, is does he choose or feel technically bound, legally bound, to abide by that administrative warrant? And I know, Councilman McPike and Councilman Chapman have both already spoke to this. It is a decision for the sheriff to make, whether he believes that administrative warrant must be followed. And so that's my attempt to just answer, I think, just technically those two questions. That is what is happening. That's what we're talking about today. And that is the difference in my understanding as a council member between those two terms and those two facts. With that, yes, please.
Thank you, Madam Vice Mayor. I just wanted to let everyone know that, we all talk to the sheriff on a regular basis. I just talked to him this morning. He encourages people to reach out to him with questions. He will meet with you. He's accessible, so please reach out to him as well with all of these questions. He's happy to answer them. Thank you.
And then before I pass one or two of these remaining questions, another question that was submitted asked, when will the City Council and Mayor make a statement about the sheriff's policy to voluntarily transfer people to ICE detention? Many of us have spoken, have given quotes. We are sitting here today making statements on that issue. So, my answer to that, and then I'm going to hand it to Councilman El-Nubi with another question and invite you to comment as well, but it would be, we are answering that question often and availably on this topic, and we'll continue to do so. One of the other questions, a variation on this topic, there's a question here that was specifically directed to Mayor Gaskins, and for what it's worth, I'm not comfortable. It was specifically directed to her and speaking about one of her roundtables. So I'll simply say for the two people who submitted that question, she will receive that question and she will provide you a response, but I'm not going to put that on her when she's not here to answer it. So Councilman El-Nubi, if you could address, is it acceptable for the sheriff to voluntarily turn people over to ICE before they have had their day in court? What do council members have to say with regard to the lack of concern for due process demonstrated by ICE in their operations? And why is city leadership not doing more to prevent this violent entity from violating the human rights of Alexandrians?
Thank you for the question. And again, thank you everyone for being here today. Certainly, this is a very heavy topic. So I'm going to, address some of the other questions that were asked, including this one. Let me just say, what's happening right now is very disappointing, sad, inhumane. What this federal administration is doing and how they are weaponizing some of the federal entities, federal quote-unquote law enforcement, and how they're weaponizing the law against people they just don't like. I could only imagine the fear that a lot of our community members are living in, a lot of the anxiety. I can tell you myself as someone who, just a person of color, I think about that every day myself. I mean, it doesn't matter that I'm a council member. I mean, who knows what could happen tomorrow? I mean, they don't care about anybody. So I feel your pain. I hear you. And honestly, it's frustrating that as a city council, we don't have a lot of power to resist that kind of behavior. But we are doing everything we can, whether that is stuff that we are telling you about or that is stuff that we're not sharing publicly, just to be smart about how we're approaching this, so we're not putting our whole playbook out there to them. I think what happened in Chiralago a couple of months ago, I mean, it really impacted a lot of families, and I heard from a lot of families. And that day, myself, the vice mayor, the mayor, we went out to stand in solidarity with our community. And I know some of my colleagues weren't in town, otherwise they would have been there. So we're right there with you, trying to do everything we can. Some of the things that we've done that we can share is we did a Know Your Rights campaign, and we distributed those red cards. And please, for everybody in the community who knows what these rights are, make sure we're sharing them. Everyone needs to know the right. That is the first step, is for you to know your right. The other thing that we do is APD does not enforce immigration law. APD does not take any part in this kind of behavior. APD, when they are out there serving warrants, they go around telling people, we are APD, we are not here to enforce immigration, and they tell them what they're doing. APD wears very visible insignia and name tags, so you know they are APD, they are not ICE. So our community does not get anxious when APD is around. And these are things we can do, like was mentioned, because APD is under our control, and we can do that. We can put these policies in place. What I also would like to do is see Congress use the power of the purse to rein in ICE, to question ICE. Unfortunately, this Congress probably won't do it, but there's an election next year, and who knows what would happen. But that's something I would love to see from the federal level, from our, a conversation that is happening and needs to continue to happen with our federal delegation. But again, how Congress is right now and how it's, who has power there. I think on the sheriff part on ICE, as was mentioned, I'm not gonna repeat a lot of what was said, but let me reframe the question that was asked. I don't think the question should be how do we pressure the sheriff. I think the question should be how do we work with the sheriff and figure out how to get to that outcome. I think what people need to understand also is the law on the state side and what the sheriff is getting from his attorney. And please talk to him, understand where he's coming from. Again, I gotta tell you, I know Sean. I know him personally, I've worked with him. Sean is a good partner. He is part of this community, he really cares. And I think having a conversation with him and working with him on how can we get that done. I just saw him this morning also and talked to him, and I'm gonna talk to him again this week. We are in conversations with him, and I'm not gonna speak for him, but if he finds a way to do this that he believes is legal, I believe he would do it. His counsel is telling him he needs to do that. Now, I'm not a lawyer. There are a lot of opinions out there that know he can actually do that, but that is the conversation that we are having with him, that the community needs to be having with him. But it's not about trying to pressure him. We could continue to work. We're talking to him. We're going to continue to have these conversations. I personally think we should be having zero cooperation with ICE. An entity that's acting like this right now, we can't trust them, so we need to be doing everything we can to protect our community from them.
A few years ago, when there was a different governing majority in Richmond, Virginia law was changed to take certain things that had been required of sheriffs in terms of their interaction with ICE and make them voluntary. Not everything we necessarily would have wanted to see move from required to voluntary, but that was a change that occurred because residents, particularly many residents in this city and across Virginia, went to their General Assembly members and said, we want Virginia law to not require local law, sheriffs to do X, Y, and Z. And my understanding is that X and Y were taking care of Z, not necessarily. We'll have a new governing majority in Richmond in January. Whatever happens in November, there will be a different governor. There will be, a new House of Delegates. And we need to work with them through our legislative committee here in the city to make sure that Virginia law is being pushed in directions that reflect Alexandria's values on issues like this. Further, when you get to the fact that there is a disagreement between two sides about what is or isn't legally required regarding different kinds of warrants, when we have those sorts of challenges in Virginia, we will often ask for an attorney general's opinion on what is required of this entity in response to this situation. Now, I wouldn't want to ask Miara's for his opinion on this, but I hope that in January we have an attorney general who might have more concern about human rights, due process, and the rights of all people in Virginia. And that might be someone who we as a city should ask our representatives in Richmond to submit a request for opinion to that then bolsters an argument on one side or the other regarding what is or isn't required in this situation. So if we have a state government or a Commonwealth government that will work with us, that gives us more leverage to move public policy in Virginia in the direction that we want to see it move in. I think we've seen throughout the last several years, whenever Richmond has given localities the option to have their local laws better reflect the values we have in Alexandria, Alexandria has quickly taken that opportunity and done that, whether it was gun laws, whether it was LGBTQ rights, and we will do that in areas related to immigration as well. So having a majority that we can work with in Richmond, having a governor who will have our back if we get into a fight with federal authorities over our policies here will be essential to navigating the next 3 years and 3 months of this administration and their un-American and inhumane actions.
And just to follow that point, and not to make it a trivial relationship, but the gas leaf blowers are another example of that. I mean, just from a legislative policy perspective, we got it to the process that my colleague has described. We got a legal opinion from the Attorney General about whether we had the authority to do something because the General Assembly was not acting on something we'd tried for several years. We got a legal opinion that supported what we wanted to do, and we since enacted that policy within months, less than a year of getting that opinion. So I don't mean to transition from sort of an ICE and immigration, but it's a relevant sort of application of the concept of what he's describing, that we can go to a new Attorney General and get better guidance on this. I want to give my colleague, Councilwoman Green, an opportunity, because I don't know that I put a particular question to you, but just to address this issue, if you'd like.
Thank you, Madam Vice Mayor. I think as you've heard everyone speak, we all think this situation is terrible. I will reiterate that we need to push Congress harder, our congressmen and our senators, and we definitely need new administration in Richmond to make real change happen. It is horrible what's happening across the country, and I think we all recognize that. We are doing the best to make sure, working with community groups, with tenants and workers, with grassroots Alexandria, to make sure our residents are taken care of, that they know their rights. We understand the pressures, we understand what is going on and how the community feels. And we, as we've all said, we stand in solidarity and we want to do more. I think that the time is coming that we will have to do more and that we will have to have, tougher conversations, and that will happen. So thank you.
Okay, if we've done about 25 minutes on this topic, and I've tried to address between the submitted today and the ones listed. Again, I appreciate I started with this, and I think everybody has spoken to it. There is an active dialogue happening both between us and members of the community directly impacted and with the Sheriff's Department. I think in any given week, one of us has met with any of those sides to continue the conversation. So please continue to submit questions. We'll continue to try to address this. But for the sake of all the other topics, I'm going to move on for now. And I'm going to start with one that sort of is a standalone question. And I'm actually going to ask staff to maybe try to find this person if after I've asked the question, because I don't know the answer. The question is, I noticed that Prisoners of War Missing in Action Day was not on the council calendar. That's September 25th this year. Could we acknowledge Prisoner of War Missing in Action Day moving forward? And then there was a request for a crosswalk on King Street similar to the inclusive crosswalk that's already there. If I could ask staff to perhaps find Colonel Klingmeyer, if he's in the audience, and maybe just follow up on that point, because I'll just admit I'm not sure what is listed on our calendar if he's still here. If not, we will follow up. As to the crosswalk question, I'll take a quick stab at it, and then I'm going to hand it over to my colleague who put forward the last crosswalk, just what the process was. My experience is with the one crosswalk we have thus far. It was a council-generated action in conversation with the community, and this is not something that has been brought before us yet, and so I don't have a response today, but I'm going to hand it to my colleague if he wants to speak to process and other follow-up.
Sure. The process right now is that we don't actually have a process for this yet. The crosswalks that we have at the sort of either side of Royal Street along King Street in Old Town were a proposal that was brought to the city by the members of the Human Rights Commission, and we appreciated their advocacy for this. They spoke to many members of council and came to me. I thought this was worth taking on, and we put a proposal before council specifically for those crosswalks that the previous council approved unanimously, and they're put in advance of last year's Pride Month. Since then, we've heard from a number of groups and a number of neighborhoods that have asked us, hey, can we get something like this as well? And I do think it is worthwhile, and we've talked to staff about the need to produce a process by which a neighborhood or community could submit a request for this and staff could evaluate it. Now, the crosswalk that we put in Old Town was done in conjunction with the repaving of King Street, so it didn't cost extra money for us to sort of tear up the street and do that. So we would need to look at scheduling, sort of what threshold of community support or input do we want. We also need to look at some of the state and federal implications. There's a former Real World star who's now the Secretary of Transportation, who, at the federal level, who is sort of coming down on localities and states that have put crosswalk art in place. And we need to be mindful of that, though we are confident in our position that Alexandria streets are Alexandria streets, and we are going to have the authority to do what we would like to do there. But we do need to be sort of conscious of the broader environment that we are operating in. And again, this is something that could be a lot easier for us to think about in January. So when staff and council are through sort of putting together a formal process, I think we'd be happy to consider any community, neighborhood, or group that would like to advocate for some ways to beautify parts of our city. We were just in an event called Art on the Avenue, and Alexandria, I think, could use a lot more art on a lot more of our avenues.
Thank you, Councilman McPike. Okay, so I'm going to shift to what is broadly been labeled as sort of planning topics that cover sort of development and housing. And I'm going to, Councilwoman Green, I'm going to send this first question your way. And there's actually two on the same topic. So I'm going to start with you, and then anybody else can join in. So there's a question: has City Council met to discuss and process how you will remedy and rectify the severe damage that Alexandria Redevelopment and Housing Authority has done? And there was a similar question on ARHA. What steps is the City of Alexandria planning to take to ensure better, and I apologize, more stable housing conditions for ARHA residents, voucher holders through private property business management, especially for our seniors and families with children and communities in Alexandria playgrounds for kids? I hope I got most of that handwriting correct. Okay. Okay, so broadly it's a question about what is the city doing to address conditions in ARHA communities?
Thank you, Madam Vice Mayor, and thank you for the question. There's a lot going on with ARHA right now, with their administration. That's an understatement. We are dealing with issues with ARHA every single day. I think we have great hope that we are going to move forward in a better way. Our residents are, I'm very happy that the residents are standing up for themselves, that they are organizing, that they are making sure that their voices are being heard. They are a very special community for me. I am in the Hopkins-Tansel neighborhood in Old Town every single week, running a reading program, so I talk to residents on a daily basis. We are always here and always accessible to them. There will be new changes. There will be a new CEO coming on board, and I'm sure other changes will be made. We are coming together, council, the city, ARHA, the residents, making sure that we come together to make sure that all issues are addressed. Many residents came to our last meeting and talked about some serious issues that were going on, and we made sure that while we were at that meeting that the city manager spoke to them. I do understand now that those issues are being addressed, and any issues that come to us will be addressed. But I think there needs to be severe changes at ARHA, and I know that what we can do from a city council perspective, we are currently working on them. Thank you. You're welcome, Annette.
And I'll just, thank you, Councilwoman Green, and I'll just note, there was an executive session on this topic, so to some extent, to kind of answer the question at its most basic, the council has met to discuss and process, but it was an executive session which we are legally allowed to do in certain circumstances, and which we did in that circumstance, but it also means it's not a public conversation at this time. Okay. Moving on to other related, I'll send this one to a West Ender. When the Landmark Mall redevelopment was first announced, it included plans for a small movie theater. At some point, this feature was removed without public explanation. Could the council clarify why this change occurred and whether there's any possibility of revisiting the inclusion of a theater? Councilman Al-Nubi.
Thank you for the question. Yes, there were early conversations about possibly having a theater there, but it was not a requirement in the plan. So ultimately, right now, it's up to the developer to put a movie theater in there. And if they want to put a movie theater in there, they can do it, but this is really a developer decision. It's not a city decision.
And again, to the extent, like, if you're new to the town hall, or you're new to Alexandria, or new to this topic, what is happening there for sure is a world-class new hospital. Inova is relocating from their current location off of Seminary Road into this parcel, and it's going to have a world-class hospital and a helicopter pad and a trauma center. So that is half of the parcel, and the other parcel will be broadly redeveloped with residential, commercial, green space activity. And it is happening for anybody who hasn't sort of swung by the old Landmark site. It is above ground now, so that's exciting. Did any of my other colleagues want to comment on that? Go ahead.
I mean, sorry. I absolutely love movies. I was a film minor in college, and it is tragic how bad the economics of a movie theater are right now. It is very hard for the theaters that are in existence to keep their doors open, and it's hard to find anyone who's willing to take the opportunity to build a new movie theater. So there was a lot of interest, since there isn't a movie theater on the west end of Alexandria, unless you want to, betray the city and go to Shirlington, which is in Arlington. So we wanted a movie theater in this. I'd love to see a movie theater over in the Potomac Yard area. We lost our theater that was there. It's just when you talk to the people who would buy the spaces or rent the spaces within this development to build out a theater, they're not biting because the economics are just so bad right now. Hopefully that'll turn around. Movies are great and they're better in a large crowd, but right now that's just where the country is as a whole, I'm afraid.
Another question in the planning area was, why was the new school ruled out for the 52 acres of land where the Landmark redevelopment is taking place? Oh, did I kill my, there we go. The schools are at or over capacity with no remedy at the current time in the West End, and the Landmark Mall would have been the perfect opportunity to relieve that pressure if my colleague, Councilman Chapman, could take a stab.
Thank you, Madam Vice Mayor. So when we were doing the planning for for Landmark, or what was Landmark Mall, I think one of the focuses on council at that time was trying to, frankly, get as much revenue out of that site as possible. For decades, that site had been a very good revenue generating site for the city. And so as we look at what we were going to do there, what we were going to plan there, how could we try to recoup that revenue as much as possible? We have a lot of needs in the city, obviously school and school capacity being one of them, but looking at the acreage there, what you could build on site, the needs of a school not only include a building, but usually include playing fields and land. Council decided to focus on making sure there was enough revenue, frankly, to keep our schools and our school district sustainable, and try to look elsewhere in the city for space. We have had a number of sites that ACPS has access to for a number of decades without any movement on school buildings on those sites. And so as we talked at that time with school board, we mentioned that as our kind of thoughts around what we were going to do on Landmark. And I could give you the numbers in terms of hundreds of $millions in tax revenue that came through that site when it was at its full and best use. And so to lose that, and currently we're losing money on that site because it is not producing tax revenue, to try to get that back to, frankly, what is needed for us to continue to sustain and build new schools and operate new schools, pay teachers and things like that, we have to have some areas of the community that are going to be revenue generation. And a mall, and a historic mall, I say historic because it's served as that purpose for many decades. We are trying to do that with that particular site. So much so that we've made investments through tax increment financing to try to get projects moving there after several cycles. As longtime community members will know, we've had many attempts by many owners of that property to get that restarted, and so this is the latest attempt. We are going to try to hopefully see that happen and see revenues come from that that can be used for other city services and needs.
Councilman Anubi.
Thank you, Madam Vice Mayor. To add to that, there's not a school site at Landmark, but there is a school site at the other shopping strip of Etzel and Van Dorn. So when that gets redeveloped, there's a school site there. Also, 1703 Beauregard that the school board purchased a few years ago, that is being used right now as a swing space, as an elementary school swing space, and that could eventually become a school. That's a decision the school board's still thinking about. So I encourage you to have that conversation with them and see what is the vision for that building. But that was creative use of space and money. I mean, land is very scarce in Alexandria. We don't have a lot of land. We have to be smart and creative on how we solve these problems. The other place I asked them about the other day is the Lower Hammond field that's not really being used. And I threw out the idea of having an elementary school with a middle school there. Like, why not? Why can't we be thinking outside the box creatively in that way? So I encourage you to continue to have that conversation with the school board.
Thank you, Councilman Al-Nubi. As I was going through questions submitted today, I noticed there was one that's asked about the status of the Alexandria Hospital site. I hope my comments somewhat address that, and I'll just go one step farther to just say I did a quick Google, and I would encourage anybody else to do so just to confirm. Working backwards, the opening is scheduled for 2028. You'll see hospital construction is underway. The cancer center construction is due to start in 2026. Oh, put your phone is too close to the microphone. But so if you literally Google Alexandria Inova Hospital, I think it's like the second link that comes up. Oh, I'm sorry. The old site. Yeah. So there was some preliminary zoning that came forward that the last council I think addressed. Before this council, the last council did some preliminary rezoning to take it from its current use to a residential use, and that is essentially the last action that's been taken. If any of my colleagues want to provide any other, go ahead.
If you look at the Howard Street bisects the hospital campus right now. There's some on the east, some on the west. The larger campus on the west. The section on the east was rezoned by the council elected in 2018 for single-family home usage. The zone on the east, which I should note directly borders my home, is been rezoned for townhouse construction. So after the new hospital is open, the old hospital will be demolished. The land will be sold to someone who could develop within those zoning requirements. So we're probably going to see something there in 2029, 2030. It should be noted that hospitals are major drivers of traffic usage, and when we have townhouses and homes at that corner as opposed to a hospital, the traffic going through the intersection of Seminary and Howard will actually go down markedly based on those usage patterns.
Yeah, I was just going to say, and Councilmember Pike did say it, I had a meeting with the hospital last week, and nothing can be done until you go through that zoning and then selling of the property. So,
one other question we got in the sort of general, it was put in the planning category, but it's thank you to the council for asking Dominion some serious questions about community choice aggregation, interconnection issues, reliability, and cost of electricity. Just to clarify for anyone, this was addressed at our legislative meeting, the second one in September. So if you want to see the questions, they're there. Since Dominion provided a spokesperson who could not answer almost every question you ask, can you let us know how you will transmit their written answers to your follow-up questions to us? So our Office of Climate Action Officer, Ryan Freed, has already coordinated with Dominion to get responses to those specific questions. He has reached out. We are waiting for a response. We will follow up. But that night, that conversation, I think just to quickly, there was a lot of talk about service and not enough talk. I think our questions were focused on sustainability, renewable energy, investment in sort of greening the Dominion grid. So the presentation itself was very focused on how do we keep people's lights on, how do we restore the power more quickly when it goes out. The questions were more focused on Dominion reinvesting their funds into greening their grid and sustainability and electrifying the grid. Go ahead.
The city has set goals for our carbon emissions reductions. We're in the process, and later this year we'll be hearing about changes to the Green Building Plan. But the overall thrust of our goals to get to a point where we as a city are not contributing to climate change requires Dominion to change the energy mix that they are providing the city. We can go a certain amount of distance by retrofitting housing that we have in place, building new buildings to a higher standard, providing support to residents and business owners to improve their own actions. But if the energy that comes into Alexandria is being produced by natural gas and biomass, it's not going to let us achieve the goals that we want to achieve. We want to see more solar, more geothermal, more wind power brought into the Dominion grid. This is something that Ryan Freed pressed the state about earlier this year, and we will continue to press the state to hold Dominion to higher standards because they're obviously the ones that ultimately have the authority over Dominion as an entity. But it's part of a partnership that we are in, that we sort of have been given, is that we are working with, we have Dominion as our electrical provider, and we need them to do their part so that we can achieve our carbon emissions reduction goals.
And just to add to that real quick, what we asked Dominion about, as the Vice Mayor mentioned, I'll just expand a little bit, we were asking them, one, are they meeting their green energy goals as mandated by law? And we're still waiting on an answer. It wasn't answered. And the follow-up to that was like, if they are not meeting their goals, we have choice, we have tools, but Dominion may try to obstruct us from trying to buy energy from somewhere else, or they can get us energy, get us dedicated green energy just for Alexandria. So there are tools, and these are the questions that we asked them about, because we want to know what our options are if they're not meeting their goals. So that's what we're waiting for them to get back to us with.
Okay. We've gotten one more question that I think fits more neatly into this conversation. Most of the parcels of land set aside for schools are not large enough for the ed specs for a school. Can the schools trade smaller parcels for a larger parcel to allow for a new middle and or high school? And I sense a few of my colleagues might have thoughts on this. So, Councilman Chapman, you can start.
So, sorry about the feedback, folks. And so, yes, that's been a conversation council's taken up with school board or members of school board multiple times. You know, we've got parcels in Potomac Yard. As you heard, we've got parcels in little places over the city. Even the one that my colleague spoke about in the Green Hill development on the West End is not necessarily big enough for a full school. And I think council is aware of that. Again, these are coming through some negotiations with developers, and so they're not setting aside a ton of space for a traditional elementary school, as it were. I think the conversation is, and hopefully with some of our current school board members, is taking a look at your real estate assets and real estate assets that the city has, putting together, like the question says, a collection of those assets, approaching a developer, someone who owns some space in the city, and saying, hey, for these different spaces, you can build whatever you want in your industry, whether it be multifamily or residential or commercial. But we would like to we'd like to trade your parcel for a decent sized parcel that can build a school on. That has been done in other jurisdictions. I think that isn't what needs to be done. I will tell you this, if council tries to force that conversation, it won't go well. And so we need some folks on the school board, hopefully they watch this, that can step up and say, hey, I want to have some conversations about real estate. At our last joint meeting, they mentioned that, but they mentioned that they're going to have conversations about real estate. But to be fair and honest, we need to have that conversation about real estate. What are we doing with the parcels that we already have? who is interested in trading them or looking at them to make some trades and deals for equitable school space. And so hopefully we can talk nicely to at least a couple of the school board members and get them to do that.
Yeah, and I'll just add, I think I heard this in the answer, but something I've also come to appreciate is that oftentimes there's the possibility of selling parcels that allow us to leverage that fund to expand other parcels. So that's another avenue here that we have available to us that I think is in the conversation. Okay, I'm going to move into sort of a parks waterfront area. You know, for everybody has in front of them sections in advance. I'm going to combine a few that are sort of similar in nature. But first, I'm going to ask one that isn't about the waterfront. Councilmember Pike, it's a dog question. Wait. Okay, sorry. Councilmember Pike is a beloved lover of dogs, so I just, I think of him. Are there, and could there be, if not, plans to add lights to the very popular Montgomery Dog Park in Old Town North?
It is definitely something that we can look into. Lighting is expensive to put in many cases, so we would have to see how it could fit into our larger CIP planning. And I just want to make sure that I don't have any notes here already about this one. I don't think that we did. But we have some great dog parks across the city, and the one in Montgomery is, it's one of the best that we have. A lot of them are near sports fields or other facilities that provide some sort of spillover lighting. This one isn't necessarily like that. So this is something that we look at time to time. We look at our lighting plan for the whole city. It's just always a challenge with the expense and sort of balancing the needs of streets lighting and sort of the larger demands of on our CIP. But I'd love to see it because we want our dogs in Alexandria to be able to play in their parks, no matter what time of day it is. I think that when I first ran for council, my unofficial slogan was "Every park a dog park," but apparently closing all the parks in and doing that would be both unpopular and expensive, so we didn't go down that route. But yes, this is a good issue. I appreciate you highlighting it for us, and we are going to look into it.
And I'd just add two semi-related points. One is, for anybody hearing like more lights in a park, I just want to caveat that by saying we've also, the industry has gotten very better at pointing light downward where it's intended. We had a lengthy conversation about this, about the lights at Episcopal and other spaces, so I just want to kind of assure people, to the extent you're hearing more lights in my neighborhood at night, that is absolutely a part of the dialogue, is how will the light be focused, when it will be turned on and off. The other element that my colleague alluded to, and that I will highlight for all of you local government interested people, is there is a CIP work session Tuesday night that City Council is going to be doing, and speaking to sort of costs and balancing and how are we spending our money, in year one and years 2 through 10. Tuesday night, the 7th, City Council will be sitting down to talk about our CIP and what is funded in it and what isn't funded in it. And so to the extent, anything today is sort of a funding question, I would invite you to stream that online or come out and listen. It'll be in the Sister Cities room is it at 6? I'm phoning a friend. What time does the CIP session start?
I got a calendar here.
5:30? 5:30?
Yeah, I think it's early.
Okay, so just putting that out there. All right. Okay, I think I'm trying to find the best question to launch us into the waterfront flood mitigation pump station conversation. There's a very few versions of it. I think the most straightforward version of this question is, the Waterfront Commission has recommended a cost-benefit analysis on the pump station at One Prince be done before the end of the year. Is city staff now working on that? Is there a colleague who'd like to take that, jump in? All right, the Councilman on Newby.
So if you watched our meeting last Tuesday, the mayor circulated a memo to get council support to direct city staff to look at an alternate location to the waterfront. So staff is going to work on that. It's going to take a few months, so that also means the project's going to slow down a little bit, pause a little bit, which in itself is a cost. on top of the cost that it's going to take to do that analysis. It's about $150,000 to do that analysis, but we're going to be doing it.
So a related question to that answer is, why are we considering spending $150,000 on another study for putting the pump house in a different spot? Councilwoman Green, do you want to tackle that from the other perspective?
Well, I think that we need to, all aspects of the situation with needing the pump station need to be addressed. There is a group of residents who are very much pro not having the actual pump station in the actual park and wanting to make sure that we do our due diligence in making sure that that will be the actual spot that would be the best place to place it. I think there's probably other things to that, but there is an organized group that is looking into that, and we've kind of pushed it off a little bit to make sure that we, like I said, doing our due diligence to make sure we put it in the right place for a number of reasons. Thank you.
And if you've been following this for kind of the duration of the waterfront plan over, 13 years, I think it is, something like that, you might recall that at one time we had 2 pump stations, one in Waterfront Park, one in Founders Park. And then we changed direction and were slated to put a pump house in Founders Park. And then it was storage tanks in Founders Park. And now it's a pump house in Waterfront Park, and now we're looking at another site. And so I think that's a lot. And I would say while the planning of what we've done overall on the waterfront is to make sure that we take care of flood mitigation, I think councils have come with various thoughts around what that looks like. Because we've changed councils, and I'm a person who's been here for most of those, I can say that every council looks at this particular issue at the time they look at it differently. And so whether you've been affected by the change of where the placement is or what it's going to look like, I think council's overall goal is to deal with flood mitigation. I don't believe that's changed. We are spending money, and we have spent money, to try to find the best place where it has the least impact, but also makes the most financial sense. And so that is what we are weighing here. I think that is why council stepped out with additional money to look at this and see if there's a beneficial impact by placing it in another area, and how much will that cost. What we don't want to do is place it somewhere and then have all these options understood that they have not been explored or even talked about to try to make the best case. Obviously, there are pros and cons, and have been pros and cons with each of the places that we've looked at. But at the end of the day, the hope is that council comes back to the community with various options, saying this is what we looked at here, this is why we didn't do it. This is what we looked at here, this is why we didn't do it. And we can be able to tell that story so that at the end of the day, the community, the businesses, folks on the waterfront understand why we put a pump house wherever we're going to end up placing it.
Thank you for that. And I just, as other resource information, Councilman Al-Nubi referenced the dialogue we had most recently on Tuesday night. The Waterfront Commission, which meets at 7:30 a.m. on Tuesday mornings, the third Tuesday of the month. But there are slide decks that are shown there that remain available on a website. I've served on that commission now nearly 4 years and have been through, 4 years worth of various slide decks on it. So if you're interested in this, because it is sort of at, reaching a decision point, I would encourage you to look at some of that historical information. I'm going to read through a few more cards and then maybe invite my colleagues to weigh in. Some of them are a little bit more comment than question, but I want to read them all so that they've been read. An observation first, this process has been rushed, poorly executed, and public participation limited as though all is predetermined. What about the preservation of open space, the reclaiming of views, room to walk and to play for everyone? Yes, in colonial times, the riverfront was a busy port. Today, we have the opportunity to create and preserve the waterfront for all. Why the rush to build something that takes away from the community? Cost should not prevail. And so I've read it, but I'm not going to put it to a colleague to answer because,
I would love to take it.
Go for it.
As I just said, this process has been a process that has extended over a decade. I would disagree that it's rushed. I think the latest version of what we're seeing is the latest version of what you're seeing. It is not a rush process. If everything had worked out, we'd probably already had 2 pump houses, one in Waterfront Park, one in Founders Park. That was the initial plan from the community agreed upon Olin plan. And so what you're seeing is the latest change in the process, but I would disagree that it's necessarily a rush process, because what we're doing as we look at 1 Prince Street is extending that process even more. And so I appreciate individuals and their perspective, but somebody who's been on council for the duration of these changes, it is not a rush process. We are trying to figure out where best to put this, and this is the latest opportunity to have that conversation. If you've been in Old Town for the last 20 years, you know that we've been continuously working on the waterfront and the Olin plan, trying to implement it. It's not something that we are rushing through. We are actually working directly to implement it, and this is one of the longest pieces of that implementation. Other pieces have been Robinson Terminal North that we've, finally approved, and that's going to be moving forward. There are pieces that are in implementations, and this is one of those. We are not trying to rush through it. We are trying to take deliberate steps to finish it, because as many folks in the business community would say, the piece that the city has to do, which is the flood implementation, has taken the longest to get done. And so I would say directly to that, again, with all due respect to that individual, this is not something we're rushing through. It's something that we've taken deliberative steps to do, and have made several changes along that path.
Thank you for that. And I don't have my colleagues. It's your 13th year? Yes. 13 years on council, but as I mentioned, I'm in my 4th year now, and every year of them has involved waterfront flood mitigation analysis. So I want to read a few more for the sake of trying to read everything that's been submitted, but I'm going to try to answer 1 or 2 of these real quick. So the city threatened eminent domain to realize its goals of an unobstructed and beautiful waterfront. Water views and access, music performances, festivals, economic growth with visitors. The big ship already blocks the view. Why not buy AMGA building and put in its parking garage? Why not eminent domain now? Or if residents don't want it in the park, a bond vote. I think the best way to respond to this now is we are in that analysis. So to the extent this question is pointed at why not consider buying a building and putting it there, that's exactly what we just signed off on the other night, to spend $150,000 in several months to further evaluate. And again, for those sort of newer to this issue, 1 Prince was always in the evaluation. It was never not considered. It's just that there's a cost to every engineering path you pursue. Every location you look into has different dynamics. So as the process moved along, we pursued farther in certain areas that met the budget for the program. So what we've done now is essentially paused, and we're going to take what had been analyzed for 1 Prince and take it farther to get a more specific number about what the increased cost would be to all of us to put the building there, rather than its current proposal, which fits the current budget. With that, I'm going to go into a related question, unless, is that okay if I, okay. So our city proclaims itself Eco-City Alexandria, but it is trying to convince our residents that it makes sense to destroy its flagship waterfront park with a large, ugly pump station when an excellent alternative location outside of the park is available. How do you reconcile that with Eco-City Alexandria? Again, the alternative location is under consideration. I want to speak for myself that investing in infrastructure that prevents the flooding and repeated damage to our waterfront is in alignment with our vision of it as an eco-city. The river will rise, climate change will bring more storms of more significant impact. We have to make these investments, and I actually think infrastructure can be beautiful and educational and contribute value as infrastructure. When we build a bridge, when we build a power plant, these things have value to our community. So there is discussion about putting bathrooms. There is discussion about outlets for performance space. There is discussion about, could we do a green roof? So to the extent the pump house will exist, we will be conscious of incorporating it, as beautifully as possible. But I happen to think infrastructure that prevents the flooding and repeated damage to our community is beautiful in itself, in its function. So that's my take, but I invite my colleague, Councilmember Pike, to respond.
I think it's important to sort of set the stage of what we're looking at and why we think it's so important to address flood mitigation in Old Town. This year, in 2025, we have about 30 days in the year where there's going to be some level of flooding in Old Town east of Lee Street, which used to be called Water Street, because that's where the river was. And everything east of there is stuff that we as people built out into the river. And when we see flooding in Old Town, it's kind of the river taking back what was once its. 30 days a year of some level of flooding. In 2100, 75 years from now, we'll have 30 days a year where there isn't flooding in that part of Old Town if we don't take action to mitigate the flooding situation we have. And the longer we wait, the more expensive it's going to be to take this action, because the money that we have today will get us more today than it would 5 years from now. Already, the long process that we've had working with the community to deal with not putting a pump house in Founders Park versus putting storage tanks in Founders Park versus leaving Founders Park alone, and where to put the pump house, as Councilman Chapman clearly discussed, has increased the cost of this project. And so as we look at this One Prince Street option, we're doing that to see, is there a way we can achieve our goal without having to use some space in Waterfront Park? Because we all love Waterfront Park. Everyone in the city does. We also love Orinoco Bay Park and Founders Park. And I think the people that live directly adjacent to them would say they're actually the crown jewel of the park system in Alexandria. And here on the West End, a lot of people might say Fort Ward Park is that. But we also, as a city council, we have to think in the long term about the impacts of flooding on this city and its ability to attract tourism, to sustain our businesses, to be the eco-city that we want to be into the future if we don't deal with flood mitigation. But we also have a responsibility to our residents in terms of the expense that we take on. The city has a credit limit, the same as any family or individual. We have a credit rating, which is AAA. We actually have better credit than the federal government because we have in place policies that give us discipline in how we spend money. So when we get this analysis back, we're going to have to look at how does that increased cost fit with our disciplined approach to spending versus the impacts on the park itself, and make a determination. And we're doing this study so that we make the most informed determination possible, but there's going to be a trade-off here. And whether that trade-off is a pump station that staff has worked very hard to minimize the footprint of in Waterfront Park, or is it going to be that we have to delay other things that we want to do in this city, perhaps up to and including projects that could impact our schools because we decide to use that money instead on a more expensive option in Waterfront Park? Well, that's the trade-off that we're going to have to make. And I'm glad we're doing the study. I supported doing the study so that we make the most informed decision possible. But there is no magic solution to this problem. It's not a problem Alexandria created. We didn't cause climate change. We are working very hard to do what we can as a city to reduce our impact on the climate. But we have to live with the effects of it. And one of them is going to be increased flooding and an imperative requirement that we as a city address it.
Also, to add to that, our staff already actually reduced the footprint of the pump station in the last few months as they looked at trade-offs. But that also comes with a trade-off. It's going to cost more 20 years from now just to make that pump station smaller. Now, when they replace the generator, they have to replace something else, and it's going to cost more money. But they made it smaller. Everything is a trade-off. The other thing, the flood mitigation project is not just the pump station. As the Vice Mayor mentioned, we are upgrading our infrastructure. Our pipes right now in that area are not just deteriorating, they are undersized. So we are putting bigger pipes that can deal with the storms that we're now dealing with and how things are going to get worse. And they're going to live longer, essentially. What we're also doing is we are upgrading the bulkheads at the river. The bulkheads are deteriorating. So we're building newer and bigger bulkheads to sustain, to be able to push back against the river. But the pump station, and I invite you to look at the presentations from our staff just to understand the whole concept. Because once we upgrade the bulkheads, if the river goes beyond the bulkhead, rises above the bulkheads and goes into land, now we need the pump station to push the water out. Otherwise, it creates what we call a bathtub. So I really invite you to look at our slides and look at the whole concept and everything we're doing. I know the pump station takes all the attention, but I invite you to look at all the infrastructure improvements that this is going to create. And again, as Councilman McPike mentioned, our credit rating. This year, we got our AAA credit rating again. We should not take that for granted. It takes a lot of work, and we don't want that credit rating to be at risk. And it could be at risk if we keep flooding. And if we lose that credit rating, projects are going to cost more. So now we can't do as many projects as we do, or the projects are going to cost more, so we're going to have to find money, raise taxes or whatever, or cut other projects to be able to do what we want to do.
Thank you. And I just want to be very transparent, and hopefully you're transparent with me. Again, if you have been in this conversation about the waterfront for a number of years and so let's say decades, and you look at the Olin plan, and you look at Waterfront Park, there's supposed to be a civic building on Waterfront Park. And so the idea that Waterfront Park is supposed to be untouched with the execution, the accurate execution of the Olin plan is incorrect. The city always thought about putting bathrooms there and other civic needs and understanding that we had a programmatic opportunity in Waterfront Park. I think the change to have the pump stations there, again, as my earlier answer says, comes through a process where we have listened to the community about what they want, in particular to the Old Town community by the waterfront about what they're looking for and what they are going to frankly have to deal with, whether it be folks in Founders Park in that neighborhood, folks in other parts of the waterfront Old Town neighborhood. And so as we look at the Olin plan, if we're being transparent with each other, there is going to be change to Waterfront Park. We could move the tanks to North Old Town, North Robinson Terminal. But then the city would probably bring back its idea of having a civic building in that park. And so the idea that that park is going to be untouched, frankly, is not an accurate one, because it has not been the adopted plan that the community at that time approved of in terms of the Olin plan. That is not the case. And so as we execute that, let's please remember that in our conversations. If we are now changing and making change for what we want to see on Waterfront Park, let's just open that up and talk about what that is. But some of the questions that I've seen, some of the conversations I've had are not accurate. And so let's please do that. Again, I'm trying to be flexible. I've been flexible over the last 13 years of talking about this and where we're going to put the pumps. I want it to get executed, right? Because the business community, particularly downtown and in Old Town, frankly sees the city as not doing its job in executing the Olin plan. Because our job is to do what? Try to stop the flooding so that they can, for those 30 plus days, make sure they're making revenue, make sure their businesses are open, make sure, if you've been to that Starbucks down at the bottom of King Street, they always have their sandbags up because they don't know when flooding is going to come. And so that is not a good look. And so getting away from that doing the infrastructure work that the Vice Mayor talked about to get away from that look, and that being a regular look of Old Town, is what the city has to do. And so how we do that, where we do that, is still a conversation. I'm not wedded to anything, haven't been wedded to anything, want to try to get this done the best way possible.
There's two other questions here, which I invite my colleagues to answer if they know the answers. I don't, but I'll address. One is, in conducting the trade-off analysis, what was the value of the land footprint of the waterfront park site? The other question is, who is conducting the study related to 1 Prince Street? What are their qualifications? Will both quantitative and qualifications, cost, and benefits be studied? So what I would say in response to both of those is we just signed off on this on Tuesday night based on a proposal that did not name a vendor, that did not name, who would be doing the work. It had a prospective scope of work. I mean, the way this sort of works is our staff can't hire a third party at a level like this, $70,000, $80,000, without it being in the budget, which this, wasn't. So council indicated, yes, move forward with this. So I believe the answer to that is likely not known to us necessarily, to be determined. If there's not a name on this card, so I don't have a way to say, like, I'll follow up with you. What I would suggest is the people who submitted these 2 questions can send a 311 just to ask to follow up. Okay, and that will allow us to identify. The other thing I will share, though, is it's my understanding, and I know the city manager is here, and maybe he'll jump up if I say something out of school, but the members of the public who are leading some of the engagement with the city on this topic will be engaged in the process. And so I'm getting a nod. So to the extent there's a question about sort of accountability and who is doing it and why were they picked, that information will be engaged with the leaders of sort of who has come to us on this topic. Is that acceptable? Okay. Go ahead.
And I raised this, if you saw the video from Tuesday, I raised some concerns about our process in terms of talking about land acquisition and real estate. It is generally not the practice of council, and hasn't been during my time, to really engage in those conversations in a public manner, especially if at a certain point we are going to be probably negotiating with somebody about real estate. And so I'm always nervous about how much we're talking about it, not trying to not be transparent, but just understanding at a certain point with wherever we put this, especially if we look at one of these other options, we're going to be negotiating with an entity. And if we put out publicly what the pros and cons are for somebody's property, that's not going to make our negotiating stance really interesting. And so I want to be clear and careful with the community about how we do this. We are looking at all options. We are trying to do things as best as we can. But with anything that we've done in terms of what I think are executive session items, we need to hold that into executive session. Trust me, when that decision is made, we will be quick and loud with what we've done and why we've done, and we can have that discussion about pros and cons and things of that nature. But I don't want us to get ahead of ourselves and arbitrarily set a price higher than frankly needs to be because we've thrown out everything into the public.
Okay, I think I covered all the waterfront/parks questions. We've got about 30 minutes left, 30 plus, depending on sort of where we're at in answers. I wanted to encourage anybody here, and if the staff has any other cards that have come in, to try to get them in soon so I can work them into our list. The questions that remain are primarily in the traffic and pedestrian safety space. So just to my colleagues, that's sort of roughly where we're going. I'm going to start, let's see, I'm trying to see if there's any I can sort of put together. There's a question about vehicle speeding. It's specific to one area. I'm going to start, Councilwoman Green, I'm going to bring this question to you just so you have time to sort of, and it's very specific to one area, and I'm going to read it, but to the extent you kind of want to address broadly how we can address that. So the question is, what can the City of Alexandria government and police do to reduce the serious problem of vehicles speeding up and down North Van Dorn Street? As a resident of the Park Place condo at 2500 North Van Dorn Street, I've personally witnessed vehicles speeding on North Van Dorn Street. Additionally, as the member of the Building and Grounds Committee at Park Place condos, I've been made aware of multiple serious speeding-related accidents that have occurred on the Park Place condo property, including a vehicle-related accident that resulted in a fatality due to alcohol consumption and speeding. The speeding on North Van Dorn is not only a problem for the residents of Park Place, but also the on-site daycare for children, a pediatrician's office, 2 churches, and then Monacan is in close proximity that has preschools. Additionally, Fort Ward Park is nearby, and so the speeding on North Van Dorn Street presents a serious risk to not only adults, but also, more importantly, the children. Councilwoman Green.
Thank you, Madam Vice Mayor, and thank you for the question. So primarily, Alexandria Police and the Parking Enforcement are the primary agencies that you contact for addressing these issues, and that's through Alex 311. We can also have someone come out to that location there to actually evaluate. And I'm not sure if this one has been evaluated before, but I know we have the same issue where I live close to Route 1. But the primary entity to contact, and we encourage you to keep contacting, is Alex 311 about the actual speeding issues.
Okay, so, yeah, just in the interest of quorum, and not at all to discourage like the dialogue, but just because I want to make sure I keep this. If what I could do then, I hear you. The Vision Zero piece sort of wasn't mentioned. For the general public here, Vision Zero is sort of our commitment to having 0 fatalities, 0 pedestrian fatalities in our city, and designing roads and implementing street procedures that serve that goal. In that plan, it sets out both high priority areas as well as the projects that we are prioritizing. So what I'm hearing is that there's been some interaction. This area is not a part of Vision Zero. What I was going to ask is, I don't see Emily Baker here, but if Deputy City Manager Alethea Prideaux is here, if maybe she could meet with you, I'm happy, and I don't want to speak for the mayor, but I think what we can do is we can elevate this specific corridor a little bit beyond today. And so if you two wouldn't mind leaving your information, and we can elevate this through tests. So thank you. Okay. Next question down to Councilman Al-Nubi. Late at night, loud sports cars often speed through the neighborhood with roaring mufflers. This creates significant noise disturbance and raises safety concerns. Are there any plans to address this kind of reckless driving?
So APD is aware. They have efforts underway. They try to prevent that, but it's sometimes pretty difficult because you don't know when that's going to happen. And by the time it happens, by the time they find out and show up, usually it's done. But also APD has a policy to not chase high-speeding cars. So if someone speeds away, they're not going to chase them just for the safety of our residents and the safety of our neighborhoods. But we're aware, and if you come across these, if there's an area where it's happening several times, that there's a pattern, then it's much easier. Then just let APD know, and they will be on top of it.
Go ahead.
So one of the things that I've been tracking is a pilot, I believe, that Delegate Joshua Cole down in the Fredericksburg area was able to get that allowed. Let me backtrack. So part of the problem here is the state's inability to allow us to kind of track some of this in an automated fashion. So Delegate Cole down in Fredericksburg was able to get a pilot for automated systems that would pick up kind of the muffler sound of some of these speeding cars and be able to tag that with a camera and be able to catch these folks. Because, again, we're not going to, we think it's unsafe, frankly, to chase these folks through the streets. But we do understand that there is an enforcement opportunity here, but we have to use, frankly, the proper technology. And so down there, they're trying to do this pilot to see how they can effectively enforce this. I am very interested in taking the information from that pilot and using that on some of our major thoroughfares that do have that problem. And so you'll be seeing us probably watching that, and when the opportunity comes, putting that in our legislative packet to allow us to do that as well, because it has become much more of a nuisance than in the past, especially in the last few years. And so if we can use some of this technology that's out there to enforce this the right way, I think it hopefully gets to the problem and we get it to stop.
Yeah, I was doing a quick Google
Yeah,
on
I
that
was
very
trying to.
topic, and so I'll just, while you were
My
speaking,
Wi-Fi wasn't working.
yeah, no, so just to encourage members of the community who participate in events like this and are inclined to participate, it was vetoed by the governor from the last session. Again, if we have a new opportunity with a new governor, you know, the council would likely be supportive of having this in our package. It was HB 2550 last go-around, but it would allow basically for automated ticketing based on decibel levels measured from a distance away. The idea being if I can hear you from there, you're too loud. So follow up on that, HB 2550, Josh Cole, and I expect this to be a topic of conversation in the new General Assembly session in the future. So thank you for bringing that part up. Let's see. Where did I start? Okay, so Councilman McPike, could you address, can anything be done about the dirty, unkempt condition of Dash bus shelters? Urine odors, litter, general uncleanliness of the areas making using Dash unpleasant, especially at Duke and Jordan and in front of Beatley Library.
So we appreciate the question. Dash actually works with a contract company to help with the maintenance of a lot of the shelters, and feedback like this allows us to communicate with them, make sure that they're giving special attention to areas that are specific, you know, recurring problems. And we've seen this in certain areas of the city, concentrated efforts not only by sort of the upkeep efforts, but also coordination with DCHS, which is our Department of Community Health and Human Services, and APD. When we have unhoused individuals who are taking shelter in some of our bus stops, which is pretty common for the shade reasons, in summer months and in sort of inclement weather, they want to reach out and connect with these individuals and see if we can connect them with services that provide them safer, more secure options than using a bus shelter. We do want every bus shelter to be clean, well-maintained, available to everyone in the city, and we don't want folks who are experiencing homelessness to be sort of reduced to having to sort of be in a shelter. We want them to have connection to services that can help them move beyond that challenge in life. So we are working on that. We appreciate you highlighting these specific locations. Dash is now aware of them, and we will continue to work because we're expanding our bus shelters around the city. Duke Street in Motion is going to be putting a whole new line of bus facilities along Duke Street, and we want them to be exactly what they're supposed to be, a place where people can find shelter as they're waiting for one of our amazing free buses to get them around town without having to have the environmental impact of using a single-person vehicle to do so.
I mean, bonus points for getting in free Dash, environmentally sustainable, come on. There was another question submitted by Mr. Turner on the 2500 block of Van Dorn, but I'm going to move past it because I think it's this. Okay, so he's in the hallway. Okay. We received a question, love the new paving on the street near William Ramsey Elementary School. Wondering if there will be speed bumps placed to reduce speeding in such a high pedestrian area. Before I proffer an answer on this, does anybody have an answer that I don't potentially? Yeah, so I think, so what I'll say, I appreciate the attending today, putting this card in, asking the question. I don't think any of us knew the answer, just because, you know, I'm not sure where we are in the process. So we've asked the question. I'm asking staff to help follow up on this question with council, help us get an answer. And this is also a good reminder for me and for us at this public town hall to reiterate the value of 311 because it's tracked and logged and it becomes data. So for better or worse, we know what, trees are by and far and away one of the most 311 topics in the city. Trash cans, potholes, there are certain things, and because they are persistently 311, we have lots of data about them. We can respond to them. We can apply for grants related to those things. So for what it's worth, not to dissuade anybody from coming to a town hall, this is a valuable interaction, from emailing us individually. The value of our 311 system is it becomes a data point. It is trackable. It is searchable. The right department, it goes into their history. So whoever submitted this one, staff is going to follow up with council, but I would actively encourage you to submit a 311, angle it towards tests, and ask the same question, and it will become part of their priorities, or it will become part of the things they're evaluating.
I would also note that the city has several programs on our website for neighborhoods that specifically want certain speed or traffic calming measures to be considered for their streets. You can find it, if you just search speed cushions, alexandriava.gov, it'll take you to the webpage where it tells you what you need to do in terms of organizing your neighbors and getting their support to bring things, how the staff will assess whether it's a street that qualifies for that sort of traffic calming program. But we do give the residents of the city tools in which to request that their street be analyzed for these sorts of protective measures if you feel that is warranted.
Okay. Traffic signal timing on Duke Street. Councilwoman Green, I'm going to come back to you. I think I'm trying to toss things around. So the question is, why traffic on Duke Street? No, I'm kidding. There appear to be too many red lights along Duke Street, and the wait times at these signals have noticeably increased. Is there a review underway to optimize traffic signal timing in this corridor? Councilwoman Green, if you could take the first crack at that.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. And I think there is an answer to this that we prep transportation for. It says the city has been working to improve traffic flow on Duke Street and make travel more efficient and reliable. Building on the success of the Duke Street traffic mitigation pilot, we adjusted signal timing to improve more green time on Duke Street, which also helps discourage cut-through traffic on neighborhood streets. And I believe this is ongoing, if I'm not mistaken.
There's a little more context we can provide. Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry. You want to keep going? No, keep going.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right. All right, we continue to evaluate and refine the signal timing and coordination plan to minimize excessive red light cycles and delays. Residents can expect incremental adjustments over the coming months. Additionally, a recent paving project required replacement of some detection equipment at intersections. That work is scheduled for completion in the coming weeks and will result in better signal performance. Looking ahead, the city will be implementing an adaptive traffic signal project along Duke Street. These signals will automatically adjust in real time to changing traffic conditions, improving synchronization between intersections, and reducing delays.
Yeah, so that question's a good example where staff did provide most of the answer, but I was actually really pleased to see there really was a concrete answer, so I hope that's what people heard there. There have been delays, but they're in process, and there's several processes that should reduce them. I'm also going to use this as a chance to shout out the Duke Street Land Use Plan is currently under discussion, and there's lots of ways to participate in that. So you're going to see QR codes and signs as you move along Duke Street. Please follow a QR code, show up to an event, take a survey, because obviously the way we use the land along the Duke Street corridor will impact the traffic and movement through that corridor. I'll also make a quick shout out. The idea of adaptive traffic signals is also part of bus rapid transit. It's not just lanes for buses, it's traffic signals that say, oh, this is a bus. I'm gonna stay green 12 seconds longer so the bus gets through, and then I'm gonna turn yellow and red. So just any chance I get to shout out a little bit of bus technology, I can't miss. Okay, next question. I'm going to go to my colleague, Councilman Chapman. Is it possible to accelerate repaving of North Jordan Street as well as North Pegram from Seminary to Taney and North Pickett? Both streets resemble the famed Costa Rican back massage, and it's causing excessive wear and tear on our cars.
And I saw who submitted this question, so I'll have to ask her some more questions about what that means. But I think one of the things that we we deal with on a regular basis is the priorities for street repaving. Folks can certainly advocate for their street to be moved up, but obviously when somebody moves up, somebody moves down. I think one of the consistent things that I've bugged staff about over the years is kind of our capacity and is there any way to enlarge that. But I think what we do when individuals or neighborhood groups or a collective come in about a street, about an area, is make sure that we get that to staff so that that can be put on the list somewhere and get done at some point in time. We can't guarantee when that's going to be done. We can't guarantee that that gets moved up, but we do work with staff to kind of ask questions about the prioritization that we see. So.
And for the person who asked this question, North Jordan Street will be repaved this year. It is very high up on the paving index. Every year we do every few years we do an analysis of all of the streets in Alexandria, rank them based on their need. I think Pegram was repaved a couple of years ago, so if there's problems of developing now, it'll move up in those rankings, but Jordan Street is on the schedule to be done before the end of July 2026. The way this works is that there's only certain kinds of weather conditions that we can do repaving in. So if it's a particularly rainy year, a particularly snowy year, or a particularly hot year, though we're kind of past the summer at this point, that can slow down progress on repaving, but our staff works a lot of long hours getting that list and moving down it as quickly as possible every single year.
So, as I mentioned earlier, our AAA rating. If we have a AAA rating, we can do more of these projects because these projects are part of our capital improvement budget. And our capital improvement budget, most of it, we borrow money for it. And when we can borrow money at lower rates, that means more projects that we can do.
Okay. We have a question about cut-through traffic on residential streets. I'm going to go back to Councilman Newby, if that's all right with you. Is there any way to discourage or prevent non-local traffic, especially trucks, from using Jordan and Taney Avenues as a shortcut? These streets are not designed for heavier commercial vehicles, yet I frequently see small trucks and other trucks that neither live nor work in this area. It's disruptive and potentially unsafe.
Well, thank you for that question. So there are efforts currently to put traffic mitigation traffic mitigation on Jordan's being studied. The data is being collected. Actually, there is a web page. As I was preparing for this town hall, I actually looked at our website. Brookville Seminary Civic Association has been part of this effort as well with the city. I see I see the president here. So. Yes, the city is working on it. Construction should start in 2026. This is the current timeline. Again, if you go to the website, our website, and search Jordan traffic improvements, you should find the webpage there. For trucks, cut-through traffic for trucks, the city doesn't necessarily prohibit trucks on most of our streets, just mainly because it's hard to enforce. But if you would like to apply for a certain street in your neighborhood to be considered for trucks to be prohibited from passing through there, there is a link, and whoever asked the question, if you want to talk to our staff or talk to me afterwards, I can give you the link. But the link is essentially alexandriava.gov /transportation-planning/truck-restrictions. But again, we can give you that link, and you can apply for that. Or you can just use 311, and we can help you get you that link and help you to apply for that. There has been also some measures that's been being put in place in that general area because it's one of those corridors that have been problematic.
I appreciate my colleague bringing up the sort of truck prohibition process that we have in the city, but please be aware that not every street in Alexandria is eligible to have a prohibition on trucks. Certain streets have been designated collectors, which are the streets that are used to try to do exactly what it sounds, collect traffic so that it doesn't spray all over all the residential streets. And so the availability of that program from street to street will vary. But staff can help clear that up, if a request is made. And these are policies that we can also assess at the city council level.
Yeah, no, thank you to my colleagues. For what it's worth, the questions that were sent in advance, a few of them here, I'll share, did allow us to sort of get some of this more specific responses. So, thank you for those who were able to sort of send some questions in advance. It does allow us, admittedly, to try to track down specific project web pages or details about eligibility for programs and things like that. I know I found that very useful. I've mentioned 311. I did get confirmation that the CIP work session is at 5:30 on Tuesday, October 7th in the Sister Cities room. All of council will be there. And the reason that CIP work session is happening, and I'll sort of, close just by addressing that, is the mayor actually brought forward a memo several months ago that said, hey, there's talk in the community about the need for a middle school. There's talk in the community about a building for Ewald Park that isn't currently in the budget. There's a few of these things that, keep coming up and keep being talked about and asked about, and they're not actually in our CIP. And so what we're sitting down to do on Tuesday night is look at what is actually in our CIP, which is, things happening this year and then in years 2 through 10. What has been socialized and talked about and evaluated to a certain point, but is not funded in our CIP. And so I think a lot of what we talked about today comes back to that issue of funding sources, priorities, what is planned for, what would need to be reevaluated. So for those of you who, please, thank you so much for taking your time to sit here on a beautiful Saturday afternoon. Please visit Art on the Avenue. Please consider, visiting Fort Ward and doing all the other beautiful things in our city. And use 311. And if any of my colleagues have any other comments to add in closing? Okay. Oh, no? All right. So thank you all so much. And thank you to staff who did a beautiful job with the IT today and for getting us all here. Thank you so much.
Thank you.